this COVID-19 period, it has really made connectivity and the internet really fundamental to our lives. But do you know that even in Singapore, 10% of our population remains digitally disadvantaged? Which is why this year, really, we would like to focus our conversations on the issues of digital exclusion and digital access faced by families and individuals in Singapore. You know, we would like to take the time with you this afternoon to think about some questions like, who are these vulnerable groups? What does it mean for them to be at risk of being left behind in a smart nation? And also, can we conceive of a world where digital access becomes a universal necessity, like a public good, you know, like electricity and water? Yet, as we address these questions, we must also recognize the limitations of today's event and also the paradox that it doesn't free itself from. So as we are talking about digital exclusion, we are doing this on an online platform. And while this platform is intended to reach as large an audience as possible, we must recognize that those who do not have access are still unable to participate fully in today's event. Yeah, so Cindy, over to you. I heard you have a question to ask me.
Yeah, I do. But before that, I wanted to first share the exciting news with everyone, Brenda. We have already, as we speak, almost close to 400 participants on this webinar.
Wow.
So this is really, really, really exciting. So we're so glad to have so many of you with us today. So Brenda, before I go into, talking about what to expect today, what we all, hundreds of us can expect today, I wanted to ask you, I've always known you as someone who loves to interact with people. You love to show us to go out, and have face-to-face contact.
Yeah.
So how was it like for you during the circuit breaker last year when you couldn't go out?
Oh, it was really tough. I recall like every one of us scrambling to get ready to work from home, right? And I know before COVID actually happened, I think a lot of people have actually wondered how it would be like to work from home and work from office at the same time, a bit of a hybrid. But it was quite a challenging experience for me because I felt very cooped up at home, locked up. I felt like my autonomy was taken away from me. But yet, I was also thankful because I was kept busy. I had a lot of things to do. And job-wise, everything was stable. We were busy and all that. But yeah, I mean, it was still an uncomfortable feeling. How about you?
Right. Yeah, I get that too. I think as middle-class citizens, you and I, we have a certain level of discomfort and fear, not knowing what COVID-19 could do to us back then. But as I was reflecting, I remembered, even so many of our beneficiaries actually really suffering during that period where they could not have access to the digital devices that is needed for home-based learning, for working from home. And if they already are marginalized in some areas of their lives, the impact of circuit breaker, the impact of the pandemic really, really was felt much worse for specific groups in our country. So I think it suffices to say that, the impact of COVID-19 and the impact of this digital divide is really unevenly felt across different socioeconomic classes. So on this note, I think that this is why we have decided for this for this day to talk about the digital divide and to talk about really what it means to have full digital inclusion, to have digital equality. And when we talk about digital access for all, there are, of course, numerous information and numerous perspectives to take, but it is not just important to take in information, it's important for us to reflect. So one of the things I really enjoyed about the last IDEP, last year when we talked about the international eradication of poverty, was how you and Kumar really got the participants to reflect and to comment. So we don't always have the answers to all the questions about poverty, but we can take some time back to reflect. So on this note, I would like to remind participants to please put in your responses. Please share your comments. And you can try asking questions. We may not have the answers, but the reflections that you share is equally valuable. So please do that throughout. And there are almost 700 of you who have registered for this event. So we're not going to be able to answer a lot of these, but to be able to put words into your experience is meaningful enough. So please continue to do that. Maybe on this note, but let me take everyone through what to expect today.
Yeah, please
right?
go ahead.
Okay.
We have a lot of things to cover today.
This year, we are very ambitious. So we have many things. And I guess it could simply be described as we're going to talk about the what and the why and the how of the digital divide, right? Because it's not a common topic among you and I. We don't really probably think about it a lot. We don't think very much about it until maybe the pandemic.
Nature. I think to most of us in Singapore, it comes as very second.
We didn't realize that it was such an important thing to all of us, right? So today we're going to first talk about the number one. We're going to have different times where we will talk about different things. Number one, we will talk about the OP results. You know, the public survey that we have implemented in the weeks leading up to this event. So in it, we will talk about what everyone thinks about what digital divide means and how people feel about it and how they experience some of the solutions to this digital divide. We're also going to have video productions on Universal Digital Access, UDA for short, where we would explore what it means and how it affects our beneficiaries. We're going to also be getting participation from the audience. So this is where we have a cool bunch of back-end people who are consolidating your responses. So please continue to do that throughout today's event. We also will be inviting comments from a small group of panelists who represents the heartbeat and the experiences of our beneficiaries who are likely not here today because, again, they might not have access to this platform that we are on. So in short, this is what we can expect for today. So I hope that I rightly represented what the team behind IDEP wants to achieve today.
Yeah, definitely. And I think an important thing that we will explore together would be if we are going to recognize digital access, as a basic human need, how will solutions actually look like or look differently?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so over to you, Cindy. I mean, we've talked so much about the universal digital access, but what does it actually mean? How does it look like?
Yeah, because we like to use very complicated abbreviations in Singapore, right? UDA, UDA.
UDA.
Yeah, so what is UDA? UDA simply means Universal Digital Access, right? And that means that universal means easily available, affordable, and
does it mean free?
It doesn't mean free because you got to pay for water and electricity anyway, right? But water and electricity are cheap, they are easily accessible, and if you can't afford it, help is readily available. So when we talk about digital access and universal, it means that it should be easily available and it should be affordable. So as we explore what UDA is about and what it looks like, I think the best way to find out what it is to actually hear from the beneficiaries themselves. So we have produced a very interesting animation based on true stories of a little girl called Joy. So as we sit back and enjoy this production, I would like to again invite our participants to share your reflections as you watch Joy's stories unfold. So let's take some time to watch this.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Hello, my name is Joy. This is my grandma. She takes care of me when Dad is working. She also tries her best to help me with my homework. All my friends in schools have laptops and phones they can use anytime they want. I share a laptop together with my dad. He needs to use it for night classes later, so I need to finish my homework before that. Dad has promised to get me a new one, much better than the one we share. But he said we need to wait a bit longer before we can get it. One day, my teacher asked me if I needed a new laptop. I was very happy. I can finish all my homework with this new laptop. But a lot of students needed the new laptops too, so the school gave them to someone else. I guess the other students needed it more. Do they need one more than I do? I need a laptop too. Maybe it's not so easy. Dad will say there's always a few other things we need to take care of first. then we can get what we need. He says everyone has these other things. Dad always says it's good to save up money for the things we need. Grandma too. She has other things when she sees the doctor. She needs help to log into her accounts. Sometimes, when we call Mom overseas, these other things will happen. We always need to find the strongest signal in the house. These other things always appear when we don't want them to. It's very frustrating. I keep asking Dad about it, but he won't tell me. I wish all these other things could go away. Not just for me. Everyone will be free to do whatever they need to do, anytime they want. I just wish it could happen right now. Oh? And that's why everyone needs digital access. And done.
What a powerful video. And as we were watching this, I realized that actually we know so many joys in our midst and so many similar families, isn't it? I don't know how you feel about this video, but again, like Brenda, as you said just now, watching this makes me recall about the profile of the people that we have here today on this webinar. You know, how many joys and their families do we have on this webinar? It doesn't sound like it's going to be a lot, So I don't know how maybe we could perhaps get some responses from the participants, Brenda.
Yeah, I think what better way than to surface, that paradox again, right? Through an audience participation activity. So we're going to do a Zoom poll. So if you would participate in it, that would be awesome. So we're going to ask you 3 questions, similar to the questions in the video, and then just put in your vote, whether it's a yes or no for you. Okay, so the first question, if you could vote on, I use a second-hand laptop because I cannot afford a new one. So maybe let's just give you guys a couple of seconds to put in your vote. You'll see what happens.
I wonder what's the expectation. Oh, 91%.
Yeah, this is a striking 91% of you who do not need to use a second-hand laptop.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I mean, just a short reflection, Brenda. I mean, there is actually a lot of hidden costs to using refurbished laptops. I get very frustrated when I have to use, a hand-me-down laptop from my husband, for example, because I don't know how to use and things break or something. So there are hidden costs to using refurbished laptops that are often unaccounted for. I'm hoping that maybe we could talk a bit about that later.
Yeah, and I think if I could extend a little bit on that point, I think I also got reminded of how refurbished laptops are often lagging. And not just the laptops itself, but I mean, there are a lot of other things you need to take note of, like the security patches, as well as the apps, the software, and things like that. They may not be as up to date, and that would cause more frustration than actually, being helpful. So why not let's move on to the second question. Okay, so how many of you actually, need help to fill up an online form? So just put in a couple of seconds there. Let's see what happens.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
What do you think, Cindy?
Almost 100%. Yeah, I mean, this is really stark, right? I mean, later, if we could hear from the beneficiaries later, that would be really, really interesting. But most of us, I suppose, by the sheer fact that we can log on to Zoom, we could speak in English and we are educated, I mean, it's probably quite likely that we know how to fill in our online forms and don't really need any human assistance,
Yeah, and actually I got reminded the most of the elderly people that we work with. Sometimes all they want to do is to go through a transaction at the bank, but a lot of things have been digitalized already. Not that it's a bad thing, but rather could we perhaps think a little bit more about the user experience also.
Right. And also the fact that if I had to ask for help, right, it can be a very shameful process as well, right? So we often forget what it means to ask for help.
Yeah, and actually on that note, right, Cindy, actually the other point that I wanted to talk about is that sometimes we don't know what to ask for help on. And I think that's another thing that we should consider as well. So to ask for help, you have to kind of know what you need help with, right? But imagine an elderly person not being able to go onto the platform. There are a lot of things that he or she may need help on, but how then do we put the right words to the request if we don't even know what are the things we need help on?
Absolutely. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's something. Oh, we do have a reflection coming in for the audience. So if you could allow me to read that. So somebody said that the human touch is important, very much appreciated, and it's more important and nimble. A more important and nimble way for us to respond is for common people like us to be supportive and generous towards this cause. Giving up a night out and go a long way to supporting someone we know or someone known to someone else we know. Oh, yeah,
right.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think it's about also kind of slowing down and maybe coming alongside someone else who is struggling to really understand what the changes that are happening in the digital platforms, right?
Definitely,
right.
Which is one of the reasons why we put up this webinar together as well. Providing information is one thing, but I think putting the stories of residents out there, people who actually experience the difficulties, that would actually be something significant for us to get across to everybody who's watching today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think we have a third question.
Oh, yes, we do. Okay, we got too carried away in conversation. Okay, so yes, the third question would be, I worry about my internet getting cut off because I cannot pay the bill. So
it's funny how I wonder whether you worry about internet getting cut off right now.
Right now, oh no! Yeah. Okay, let's see.
This should. It's 92. Okay. Yeah, Brenda, again, this is such our current profiles of the participants here. So many of them actually don't have to use refurbished laptops, don't have to worry about internet getting cut off. Maybe what do you think what our beneficiaries would be? How would they respond to the same questions?
Yeah, definitely. So I think before we actually hear what they have to say, once again, I think it's important for us to talk about the paradox that, for those of them who don't have digital access, they are unable to participate fully in an event like that. But yet, it is definitely important to listen to what they have to say and find ways, to increase participation for all of them. Yeah, so I think it's timely that we show the videos that were so nicely filmed based on, the back-end team's interview with beneficiaries themselves. So let's have a look.
There's only one PC that's given for the house. So they gave us a laptop for my daughter. But my son needed a device as well because he had to zoom in.
I need to get a new laptop. I don't think I can afford at the moment.
My teenager is a well-performing child. He has great capacity and caliber in school. His teachers will attest to it. But even they felt that he was extremely resentful towards e-learning, not because he didn't know how to do it, but because he didn't have the resource to do it.
I said I don't know E-业，帮我E-业，他就帮我弄，叫我进去啊，马上打针，很后悔，不会这种填表格。
Sometimes it's like very complicated forms are not able to do.
find it like still is a burden for me to pay.
我2个多月没有还了 WiFi， 他说暂时没给我还，你给钱他就给你还。
But it would be nice lah if like if there's any kind of help from the government to pay for us the Wi-Fi since because it's a necessity for everyone, right? Same like the electricity, the water bill, like that, right?
所以我准备去巴萨啦，麦当劳啦，这样哦，上网哦。现在这个时代，每个都真的很需要 WiFi。我真的很希望提倡政府给大家免费的 WiFi 吧。
I believe that every student in the education sector, regardless of where you stand in the economic status, they deserve a good quality material to use for studies. To be granted a device that's specialized for education so that to ensure that we won't have to struggle with education, we won't have the struggle of internet connection and everything. I think that's what every student needs.
I really am very curious how our participants are responding to this very touching video, because you look at it and most of them have responded quite differently from how we have all responded to these 3 questions. So as we talk about this, I mean, I'd like to really encourage participants to just key in your responses, your reflections, and we would like to hear from you. But before we start sharing about that, I mean, I was reflecting myself on how it felt like to watch these beneficiaries share about their lives. I mean, it sounded like it was really challenging to have to depend on public Wi-Fi, especially in a time like this, the pandemic, where it is not always so safe to be out in the public areas. I'm also thinking about how actually that it's not that we have not done enough. We're doing some things for
quite
different
a lot of
people.
things actually.
So whether there might be probably some issues that we are not seeing that might have perhaps perpetuated the divide. So it might not be the fact that kids don't have access to devices, because kids generally do. It might also be much more complicated than we think it is. So there's so many questions in my head as I was watching the beneficiaries. So I don't know about how the participants are feeling about this. So Brenda, do you think is there any reflections coming in?
Yeah, there are. But before I read them out, perhaps I will share my reflection as well. So I think, Cindy, as you were talking about it, right? I think I definitely do agree with you that resources have come in fast and furious, especially during the circuit breaker period. I think resources from the state, resources from even citizens helping one another, resources from social workers and stuff like that. They have all come in fast and furious. But sometimes when we think about resourcing, perhaps we need to also be a bit more. Solutions must be a bit more thought through and holistic, not piecemeal. I think one thing that I could think of would be adult learners, for example. I think we have resourced the children really well to prepare them for HPL, and that's important, and we should continue to do so. But what about adult learners? I think in the whole journey about skills upgrading, we talk so much about it and stuff like that. Sometimes they go for classes, they get to use the infrastructure there, but when they go home, they can't practice because they don't have these resources available at home, whether it's internet that they can depend on, or even a laptop that they do not have to share. I have clients telling me that they have to use their children's loaned laptop to access online classes, and I find that a bit unthinkable in Singapore 2021.
Right. Right. Especially after too many years of trying to really transform our digital landscape, right? Yeah. And this, what you've just said, I think resonated with some of our participants here. Yeah. So I'm going to take some time to share some of the feedback given by our participants. Yeah. I mean, one of you have said that, a senior actually called you to ask for help to translate over handphone because the counter staff can only, because of a language barrier, and he could only speak Hokkien, but the counter staff could not speak dialect. But the staff could not take his handphone because he's afraid of, transmission of COVID-19. So this is really, really hard. Just the pandemic has made even conversations among citizens harder than it already is, right? So that I think is an important reflection to know that the impact of the digital divide is really felt greater during this season. Another one of you also said that it isn't just about issuing devices and installing Wi-Fi. Yeah, absolutely. Some people don't know how to use the devices. They don't know how to troubleshoot. And there's so much fear surrounding the usage of borrowing devices among some of the people that among the beneficiaries, because they're afraid that if you spoil, cannot replace, right? So that's really, really difficult. And there's an inherent fear in borrowing stuff, because what if I spoil it, then I can't pay?
Yeah, and these stories are really real, isn't it? I mean, these are real stories on the ground.
Absolutely.
And it's important to know, exactly what the user experience is, and to think about these things as we roll out nationwide solutions. Okay, so we are going to wrap up this segment and jump into another segment that's going to be really exciting as well. So we've spoken a lot about UDA, right? Universal Digital Access, but how do we actually address it? What do most people think about universal digital access, and how can we possibly take things forward? So earlier on we mentioned the 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶. So 𝗘𝗶𝗴 is really a platform that seeks to introduce a new way of participatory research, where people can really share their opinions in an open manner and in real time as well. So more than 700 of you have participated in the 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶 before today's webinar, and we were really excited to read your insights, comments, and reflections. So on this note, I'm going to invite two people, Santosh, our collaborator from 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶, and our colleague, Pat, to share some of the exciting findings from the 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶. Santosh and Pat, please.
Thank you so much, Brenda and Cindy. Hello, everyone. My name is Santosh, and together with me, we have Patricia from AMKFSC.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy to have you today.
Yes. So while I load up my slides, I'll just share my screen.
Yeah, so it's quite exciting, Santosh. And, I'm so curious, what is 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶 and why 𝗘𝗶𝗶?
I'm so excited to tell you the reasons why we used 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶 as a platform. 𝗘𝗶𝗴𝗶 is an AI powered conversation platform. If you imagine in the ancient Greece, in ancient Athens, citizens will gather in the town square in the middle of the city to come and discuss about issues that they care about. That is what we call participatory democracy or active citizenry. And fast forward 2021 in IDEP, what we have done is to take the same concept of participatory democracy and active citizenry, and we deployed a virtual water cooler conversation in the midst of Singapore for the past 1.5 months for citizens to share their views on the digital divide. So what we also realize is intelligence does not lie in just a few experts or in the organizers of the event. What we wanted to do was to crowdsource intelligence from citizens from all walks of life. These are 714 participants who contributed 706 comments. And we're going to share all of this intelligence, crowdsourced citizen intelligence, that is currently running in the virtual water cooler that we have that's deployed on the cloud. And this conversation is going to run till the end of this month.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear what our poll respondents have contributed. I think it's really quite exciting. 700 over participants of you all. And shall we go on and tell them what we have gathered so far?
Absolutely, Patricia. So I'll go on to my next slide. This is what we call the helicopter view of the entire state of affairs of what citizens feel about digital divide. We broke down the massive, complicated issue of digital divide into 16 sub-issues, and we formulated 16 statements or hypotheses to test in the virtual water cooler that we launched about 1.5 months ago. What we realized from that virtual water cooler conversation is that 11 out of the 16 statements are common ground statements, meaning there are far more issues that we are united on as a society than we are divided. Normally, on social media platforms like Facebook, their algorithms are tweaked to actually exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. So in online social media platform, we'll only see the divisive comments or the divisive parts of the conversation. Whereas in OP, we managed to see 17 common ground statements. So we are actually united as a nation, and we are not divided on the issue of digital divide. 11 out of 16 statements is close to 70% of the sub-issues that we explored in the conversation.
Wow, so Santosh, let's bring our audience through, the couple of important themes and issues we have pulled out together, as a community, right? It's what it means that is important for us.
Absolutely. So from helicopter view, we are going to go and do a deeper dive into some of the insights that we uncovered. Now, the first insight is, Patricia.
Yes, and we were so, it's not surprising, right, when we first saw this poll result that, many of y'all and all of us agree that digital access is a basic human need. And we all agree above 90% that, we need digital devices and connectivity to first earn a living, right? Many of your, 93.27% of your said that I cannot study or work without a computer, right? And the second thing that we agreed conclusively is that we need it to meet our basic needs. And this is so important because it's so fundamental as, being able to participate meaningfully in society, right? And the third point is that we want to be connected to people who matter to us. Remember, the grandpa who wants to connect with his grandchildren, a mom at home who wants to connect with her children. These connections are so important to us as human beings, right? And when we saw these poll results, it's like, yes, it's a unanimous yes. These three things are a human basic need: earn a living, meet basic needs, and to be connected.
Yeah, and it's so surprising to me that I take all of these things for granted. So digital access is a basic need, just like electricity and water today.
Mm-hmm. And it should be, life essentials, right? Yeah, and we go on, and then we found that, as a community, as respondents in audience in Singapore, we are aware of the digital divide and we care. Santosh, when we first saw these results, I feel like in my heart, something warmed up. Like, it warms out the cockles of my heart, right? So over here, 93% of yours believe that it is harder for some populations amongst us to learn how to use digital technologies, right? And that it borders us if there are people amongst us, like seniors and low-income families, who are left behind because they are unable to access digital resources. And this is really important because, it tells us that, contrary to the popular opinion that many of us could be apathetic, but these two statements show us that we care and we are aware that there are some in our midst who have difficulties with digital literacy, and that it bothers us that there are people amongst us walking beside us every day, walking to the MRT, taking the same bus as us, who are left behind due to the digital divide.
Absolutely. This also warms the cockle of my heart. The word and the verb bothers, it's quite a strong verb. And this shows that we really care about the issue of digital divide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next insight. And this is, citizens want to contribute. A lot of us have the misconception that Singaporeans are an apathetic lot, but the poll results show otherwise. And so this is the statement that we had. Statement number 16, I'm willing to contribute time to help someone to learn how to connect socially and access services online. 66%, an overwhelming majority of Singaporeans agreed that they're willing to contribute time to help someone. Now, the suggestions or the crowdsourced citizen intelligence that came, they are now structured in this pyramid that we'll go through with you step by step. First point, charity begins from home. And this was a verbatim comment that came from a participant. We can start from our own household and extended family members by reaching out to and teaching those unfamiliar with online connectivity and services. Patricia, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, when I first saw this, the first thing that came to my mind was, yeah, it can be so simple as in, you know, I can do things at home with my mom. You know, sometimes, you know, you can get impatient with them and you feel like, hey, you should have gotten this much faster. But, you know, as I sat down with my mom and I remembered this, I really feel like, you know, I need to be more patient and to teach her one thing at a time. Yeah. How about you, Santosh?
Yeah, no, I mean, there are times where I can just, like, I'm working on my computer and my mom enters the room and then I snap at my mom. I'm busy working on the computer. I'm having an online Zoom session. And that is where when I take a step back and I reflect, I realize that actually, it's very important to look at things from the lived experience of the people around us, and charity really begins from home.
Yeah, and there's so much data that's telling us that, you know, mentoring can be so helpful. I think for our parents' generation, we should hook our moms up.
Absolutely. So the second insight is about offering direction. So there's an overwhelm in terms of the type of services or type of help that is available. So this is a verbatim comment again from a citizen. My role would be to direct those who need to learn to community centers or other avenues that teach so as to avoid duplication of services. So it's about just offering direction, which is quite significant. Next, serve in our neighborhood. I'm already doing this at the coffee shop with seniors and less literate hawkers. This is so amazing. Like, this is so unlike me. When I leave my house, I have tunnel vision. I go straight to the workplace and I leave. I have tunnel vision again, but this person has got peripheral vision. He is on, or she is on the lookout for people to help. Now, moving up the pyramid, it's about matching assets with needs. This is so aligned to the philosophy of asset-based community development. And this was an amazing idea. I think we could pilot this in Singapore. So incentives can be provided to those who are jobless or low income, but yet familiar with technology. So these people, they have assets, they have strengths. And these people, so this can be an avenue for these people to get vouchers or incentives to buy their daily necessities. So this is an idea worth prototyping in Singapore, and it came from a member of our public. Now, at the tip of the pyramid, it's about we learn by teaching others. So it's about the idea of paying it forward. Have seniors or low-income communities who just learn to teach and share with their community so that the knowledge is retained and they have agency of their own effort and knowledge.
Yeah, and we were just talking about it. I feel like we should be setting up support groups for our moms and dads and grandpa and grandmas. I think they are the best coaches and mentors for one another. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll move on to the next slide. Yeah, automation still requires the human touch.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, you know, we all know that, you know, in such a fast-paced society, we are all hyper-digitalized. Automation still requires the human touch, right? And 92% of us agree that when navigating, you know, all the services online, there should be the option of human assistance. And I totally agree. You know, we hear of stories from our older age community members that, you know, they wish that there was someone to be able to attend to them. You know, like one of our respondents said just now, sometimes because of language barriers, you know, it just feels so helpful to have the human touch in these services. And this is really what we all aspire to be, right? To be able to connect. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's human touch when we're accessing online services from home. The next one is about services in the physical location outside of our homes.
Yes, and ultimately, overall, we all agree, a huge majority of us, in fact, agree that automation is good. However, it still requires that human touch.
That's great. We'll move on to the next one.
There
are hidden costs to refurbish laptops. I think we talked a great deal about refurbished laptops. So this is a statement that we asked. This was the hypothesis that we tested. A refurbished used laptop is sufficient for me. I don't need a new laptop. So 57% of the respondents agreed, and 24.79% of the respondents disagreed, with 17% who were undecided. Amongst the people who agreed, we looked at the comments of those who agreed. The comments could be categorized into two basic buckets. First is about saving the environment from electronic waste. The second bucket of agreement is about very basic digital needs. So these people have very basic digital needs. They don't need a new laptop. A refurbished laptop with minimal function and features suffice for them. Now, amongst those who disagreed, these are the categories of the comments that came from our participants. First, higher end digital needs. So there are people in our midst who have higher end digital needs. For example, video conferencing or editing software. So such functions require lots of speed and RAM. The second one is about additional stress. I believe from the video that we watched from Joy, in addition to dealing with the stress of academics, she had to figure out the technical problems of a refurbished laptop, for example. The third one is about social perception. Why your laptop looked like dinosaur laptop? My classmate laughed at me when I used my laptop in school. So I guess these two statements, social perception and additional stress, probably came from people who are studying in Singapore.
Yeah. And Santosh, when we saw this statement, I think our heart broke a little because it's so real. It's not something that we took out of the books, but this is real.
Absolutely. So the other issues are quite self-evident: reliability and exclusion from basic services. So there are some basic services that require high-end devices as well, that run on iOS 14, for example. So these are some of the comments that came from the participants who disagreed. We'll move on because we are running out of time. The second one are the unintended consequences of universal provision. So this is the statement: 63% of the respondents agreed, whereas 23% disagreed. Now, for those 62% or 63% that agreed, there are three categories of comments. First, what if take-up is low? So what if the elderly are reluctant to learn how to use a device? The second one is really about preserving the authenticity of face-to-face connection. So people have forgotten the basic forms of how to interact. The third one is this whole idea of the boiling frog analogy. So there is cumulative damage and it's insidious, and we don't realize the cumulative damage that's happening when we access such devices. Amongst the audience that disagreed, there are now four categories of comments. First was a nice rebuttal, a very funny rebuttal. Does building roads cause car accidents? So this assumes the worst of situations. It could also result in less scams, online falsehoods, addiction, and excessive use. So this is a great and quite a pertinent rebuttal for those who disagreed. Now, there's another point, and this person, a Singaporean, made a distinction between susceptibility and causality. So saying that is the cause is actually a strawman argument. It was actually the providing digital access is actually used to address existing deeper issues such as a lack of education or social isolation. So don't forget the underlying issue that is at stake. The third one is access increases awareness of cyber safety. So if you increase access, people would actually practice spotting scams and being aware of what constitutes addiction. This surprised me. Now, the fourth one, which is quite obvious, absolute numbers does not mean percentage. So we'll move on to the summary. Patricia, would you like to sum up the first parts of the summary, which is in green? So the first one is on unity.
Yes, and thank you, Santosh. So, you know, as a community, we have come up with things that we agree on, right? And this is unity. There are far more issues that unite us than those that divide us. And this anchors us, right? The next one that we talked about is on basic need. We all agree that digital device is a basic need in society, especially today. And the third thing we came together with is care. We are aware of the digital divide today and we care. The fourth thing is about contributions. You all and we all want to contribute, and this is huge.
So this and this
is where we build on our existing strengths. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Santosh.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we can build on our existing strengths. There's a lot to celebrate and to build on to mitigate some risk and do more work. One of which is the human touch. Automation still requires the human touch. There are hidden costs to refurbish laptops. And we might have to be mindful of the unintended consequences of universal digital access.
Mm-hmm.
So for everyone who is here, please continue sharing your views on this live virtual water cooler, link.op.live/universal digital access. On the right side, there is a nice QR code that you can scan immediately and share your views in the poll. The poll will be closing on 31st of October. Meanwhile, there is a plea. We will still need your help to reach out to Singaporeans who are living in 1 to 2 room flats or those who are 65 years old and above to make sure that we don't overrepresent their sentiments. And finally, watch out for a detailed report towards the end of November or early December. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Santosh. Thank you, Pat, for this really interesting session. And we are noticing a lot of reflections and comments coming in from the participants, but it's so unfortunate that we're running out short of time as well. So we might not be able to go through your comments, but please keep them coming in because, you know, giving words to your own experience is in itself important for us to know and for our participants to be able to label what is going on for yourself. So please keep them coming. But I would like to bring your attention to actually one particular platform called Digital for Life movement. And this is a movement that is led by the community. And if you are interested to contribute or help others to go digital, please Google IMDA's website for Digital for Life, and how you can, from IMDA's website, you could understand how you can get involved or how you could also support the efforts of this digital transformation that a nation is going through. So yeah, on that note, I would like to quickly take us to the next part of our webinar.
Yeah,
which,
Cindy, if I could just chime in and
please do
interrupt you. So earlier on, you have called for the audience to participate through Digital for Life, right? And can I say that we have 434 participants at the webinar listening in right now. So imagine if all 434 of us participate in one way or another or spread the word. Imagine, you know, the effort
impact
and the mileage. Yeah, that's
right. Right. Imagine the impact. Yeah. And then if the other people that we speak to and are touched move on, you know, that could be a ripple effect that we could really achieve really bridge the divide that we are talking about today. Right. So at this point, I wanted to also acknowledge that again, the discussion on the OP public survey may not necessarily reflect those of our beneficiaries who do not have access to the OP public survey. So it is important for us to hear for the views of people who have interacted with those among us who do not have digital access, and also to hear from people who have worked with families who are struggling, just to hear them comment about how they felt when they heard some of the data that were collected, you know, from the OP survey. So on this note, I'd like to pass the time to Irene. Irene is Associate Professor of the NUS Social Work Department and also the NUS Social Service Research Center, So I'm going to give her the honors of introducing the panel and to take the panel through a discussion on the data. So over to you, Irene.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, since last year's circuit breaker, I've started research on universal digital access. I interviewed families with challenges in digital access, as well as practitioners and volunteers helping these families. So today, I'm very glad that I can moderate this discussion with the people who have been working on the ground. We have 3 panelists, 2 volunteers, 1 social worker, and I'll first start by asking them to introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Jonathan.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jonathan. I'm a year 4 NUS social work student. So I interned at South Central Community Family Service Center in May to July this year. So during this time of my internship, I encountered some families who are not familiar with basics, the very simple basics of laptops. So what I helped to do there was to set up some tutorial and guides on how to use the laptops or certain platforms. Yeah.
Thank you. How about Rebecca?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebecca. I'm a lawyer by training, but I'm also an entrepreneur who is passionate about work in the community. My hope is to contribute sustainably to the community and to help people in need recognize their value and also to build independence for them. Last year, I led a project which was initiated by Beyond Social Services to provide free Wi-Fi at the void decks of certain HDB public rental flats in Kebun Baru. And down there, we worked with community leaders to roll out a no strings attached free Wi-Fi network for people to get connected. I was also part of Beyond's connectivity task force, where we came up with a comprehensive strategic plan during the COVID-19 pandemic to help our communities in public rental housing to get online.
That's wonderful. And over to Ranga, our veteran social worker, community worker.
Thanks, Irene. Hi, I'm from Beyond Social Services, and I think last year we realized there were 4 key areas of need for the communities we worked with: food, money, digital access, as well as employment. So we started this digital divide campaign to get contributions from whoever could provide their devices, as well as funds were donated towards providing connectivity and digital devices to people. And we have worked quite closely with volunteers like Rebecca, as well as agencies like 𝗍𝗂𝗡𝗍𝗂 and Engineering for Good, to ensure that many of the families receive digital devices and connectivity. Happy to share today with the challenges that our families have faced.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on this panel, everyone. Okay, let's start discussion. We've seen the poll results. Can I ask you to share what you have seen on the ground, the challenges you found, and how that squares with the poll results? Maybe we start with Jonathan again.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think one of the points that really struck me was the basic need part. I think this is something that sometimes we take for granted, because it's like what I shared just now, right? I helped to set up some guides and tutorials how to use certain platforms. And these platforms that we're talking about, it's not like very complicated. They're not asking they're asking how to do like video editing, but it's talking about Zoom, or even for the students, SLS, which is the main platform for e-learning. So it's very interesting to see, because if this is the main platform for e-learning and they don't know how to use it, then how can they learn properly? And you can see why it's so important for them to actually know how to use their digital devices and actually have access to it. So I think this is one of the main few things I saw, is like the lack of access leads to the lack of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting also, and I think there was some point that we came across also during the COVID-19 period, when we were actually helping to collect, refurbish, and distribute laptops to some of our members as well. And I mean, it was interesting also where the poll results also said that a lot of people agree that a refurbished laptop may be good enough. I think for me, it's not so much the question about whether the laptop is refurbished or not, but it's more of the condition that the laptop is in. So, you know, you imagine if people really don't have already digitally excluded in the first place, to provide a laptop that may not be in such good working condition, or which may hang, you know, every couple of hours. This just provides additional hindrance and additional roadblocks to some of the members who may find it challenging to begin with. So I think the condition of the laptop is actually really important.
What both of you said actually reminds me of the literacy component as well. Like what Jonathan said, the students themselves don't know how to use the SLS environment, and part of it is perhaps the parents don't know how to use it, right? And in terms of when you have a refurbished laptops, you actually need to have a lot more knowledge about how to deal with laptops that are older, right? That might need patches and might need fixing here and there. And if you already start from a background where you don't know as much, then all the more it's very challenging to be able to use the laptop or the online resources well enough. Yeah. Ranga, anything to add?
I think from the poll and the video that we watched, I'm glad that we're all here today putting a spotlight on this issue. So COVID presented opportunity during the crisis to really understand more intimately the challenges that the lower income communities face, and especially children. We already knew that the kids were being left behind in school, and with home-based learning, it was a further detachment from the school environment and learning. So that was very, very apparent for us. And secondly, as parents struggle to find new employment, they found that they also needed the digital knowledge, ability to use digital platforms to apply for jobs, which was already present, but it became more acute during the crisis. So I'm very glad that we're here and putting a focus on this issue so we can discuss further. From the poll, that 93.4% say that they care about this issue is already very heartening. So once we acknowledge the issue, now we can do something about it. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Can you say more about the forms? You said the employment forms.
Yeah, so when you're applying for a job, I mean, even previously people had to submit their CVs online. And then during the pandemic, it became even more so. Any types of forms, whether you're applying for financial assistance, whether you're looking to access simple platforms, right? You're making a medical appointment, you had to get online. And that is definitely a challenge for everybody, because one is definitely the access, whether you know where to go to get these forms. Secondly is language, whether you're conversant in English, whether you can write English and be able to understand, even sometimes when I'm looking at a form myself, I tend to get very confused as to what to click or, what to agree to. And then this captcha comes up and you've got to put in what the captcha is, things like that. So I think that overall, this assumption that everyone is able to do it, it's not true. Not everyone is able to do it.
Yep. So I know during this period, social workers became form fillers for their clients, right? And going forward, we're not sure that should be a role that social workers or volunteers continue to do, right? As we put up more and more things online.
Yeah. So this was something also that came about when we were helping some of our members to apply for the NEU PC schemes to get Wi-Fi and access to devices. So, I mean, a lot of the challenges that we faced were that the forms were actually online, and to get the beneficiaries to actually even have access to these online forms was the challenge. Otherwise they would have to get the forms printed out or collect it from the school office. And also, as people mentioned, during the COVID-19 period, it's not safe. It may not be safe to go out to expose yourself. Or even mobility was a challenge at some point of times. So I really think that, a lot of these forms can actually be streamlined so that, the forms can be a lot easier for people to access. We actually had another issue also, which was actually the type of forms that were to be filled in. There were a lot of there's the application process, and there were also certain different technicalities that people had to fulfill in order to fulfill the criteria to be able to apply for these programs. And some of our members weren't able to comply because of some sort of technicalities like income documents that they weren't able to produce. Yeah, so like say we had a certain member who was looked after by their grandparents, and the parents are not contactable. So, when they had to submit income documents, they couldn't get income documents for the parents. So, and they weren't able to qualify for the program. So it's quite sad to see, some members not able to apply because of these certain technicalities. So, I'm really hoping that a lot of these things can be a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more easier to access.
Right. I guess what you're bringing us to now is besides just knowing how to fill up the forms, is about meeting the eligibility criteria for the forms. And at this point, maybe we can discuss a bit about this concept of universal digital access, which I think throughout our MCs have been also explaining to us, right? So if we are thinking that now digital resources are basic needs like water and electricity, then they should be public utilities as well. And if we think about how we have water and electricity already plugged in at home, already highly subsidized by government, and if we need more help, then we apply. But now with digital resources, as what you've just described, Rebecca, it is a process where if you need it, then you apply, right? For internet connection, for the digital resource. But yeah, so what's your thinking about how we can get there, or whether we should, and yeah. Anyone?
Yeah, I definitely think that, I'm super agreeing with the fact that it should be a universal access. This thing should, like what we have been saying, it is a basic need. It's essential for you to be able to participate in society. And I think that there are resources, there are programs that are coming in to help people, but the way that people are being helped needs to be a lot easier for them to access.
Right. So the concept where I think Cindy was explaining, more easily available, right, and more affordable.
Yeah. I'm thinking that, we have been discussing this issue, I think, for the last year, especially. How should access be provided and what is the access that people need, right? And I'm wondering why we ponder over it so much. When Irene, when you talk about it being essential, like water and electricity, why do we ponder over it so much? So the question for me is that, are we concerned about cost? Are we concerned about, people having to spend more money, or is it a question of worthiness? So the last actually is what disturbs me. If we then look at, are people, lower income families, worthy enough to have access? Then I think there's something that we need to explore deeper into that. So of course everybody needs to spend some money on their own essentials, and I think we should put that question of who is going to spend money on this aside first. Is first to explore what is needed for survival, and what the pandemic has shown very clearly is it is needed for survival. And if that being the case, then how do we go about looking at policies, looking at structures to ensure that it is provided? So when on a day-to-day basis, like the video that we saw, right, we have come across so many children and parents making choices on how to use the little access that they have. So in the early start of the pandemic, we actually got them paid subscription. It's like a paid card. And some of the families didn't find it enough, right? Because everyone was on home-based learning and everyone had to have access, and then we just end up paying more, which seemed like a bigger amount. Couldn't there be a better solution then to be able to give them cheaper access? But there was no choice but to give it to them, right? So I think we got to attend to the basic need first, and then look at what policies can be put in place to ensure that it's an ongoing access. So that's what is going through my mind. Yeah.
Nicely put, Ranga. So yeah, okay, Jonathan, you want to add on first?
No, yeah, I just want to say I really agree with what Ranga said, because for the example of giving the mobile data cards to our family, does anyone here roughly know how much data does Zoom takes up within an hour?
Nope.
Right. So I did on myself, just Zooming my girlfriend, just one person. It took up 5 gigabytes of data. Just one person. Imagine if I'm doing a conference call with so many other videos, how much more data is, how much can a mobile plan be? 100 gigabytes? And 100 gigabytes at what speed? If we're saying this is something that they need, then why are we looking at what's the bare minimum, not even the bare minimum, but what is like a plaster for them to get over what they don't have now? Because if the data plan runs out, it will run out very fast. Then they're back to the same question of I have no digital access, which is the problem already, right? So I really agree with what Ranga said. Like we have to look at why is it so important to provide it, rather than just now try to ask who should provide it. Because it's very important for us to know why we need universal digital access. Because all these small things like data plans, all this sounds good on the first hearing because it's cheap, everything. But when in practical usage, doesn't work.
Yeah, so Jonathan, I was going to ask you in particular, because I think you had told us that you're kind of a tech geek. Because latching on what Ranga was saying about it being a survival need. Do you think it's a survival need? You know, having digital access, like you say, Zoom. Do you think it's a survival need? You know,
it's definitely a survival need now. I think especially in the way how we live right now. I mean, look at COVID, right? We can't do face-to-face interaction. Sometimes we completely can't even meet people at all. We need technology to interact with people. So this just like this talking about just doing like communal kind of stuff that is really one of our basic needs. But even look at how the market is changing. So I've talked to some of my friends in the tech industry. So one of my friends gave this interesting example of real estate. So we think of real estate, we think of, you walk into a showroom, then the person say, oh, here's the house, here's the rooms, everything. But nowadays, real estate also, there are some companies that have apps and websites to actually give you a digital tour, and not just the floor plan, but like you can digitally walk around the house and you can even measure how long the room is. And if there's a table in the room, you could even measure how long the table is, or in place your own dimension of your own table there. So imagine if you don't know about all this and you try to go into the market next time. You will be left out. You'll be inevitably left out, because you'll be doing something that other people is doing, and other people will be doing something you're doing and more, because they have that digital access and literacy. So it's definitely, to me, it's definitely a need. It's something is very important. It helps us to move forward.
And if I open this question up to Rebecca and Ranga as well, all of your examples so far is about now being COVID-19. After COVID-19 is over, do you think we will still need digital resources to this extent?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I totally agree with what Jonathan has said, and also adding on to that, in terms of providing, even having access to a laptop, it shouldn't be just a laptop that just has basic use. For example, just basically used for home-based learning. It should be a laptop that has access to any kind of things that you and I would have access to. Because it could be a situation where someone may not be so academically inclined, but they may discover that they have skills in, say, Photoshop, in content creation, or in video editing, things like that. And if you don't have the access to begin with to be able to explore and learn on your own, you'll never realize that this is something that you would be good at. And in that way, that you would be disadvantaged without even knowing it. A lot of these things aren't necessarily taught in formal education. Even the earliest coders, the earliest, content creators, video creators, all these people, a lot of them, they were self-taught. So, it's really important, I think, to give people an equal chance to participate and develop in society, to create alternative pathways, career pathways for themselves as well.
That's a powerful point. If you don't have it in the first place, you can't even go on to this more advanced skills.
I think for me, the post-COVID, definitely the digital access will still be around. But where we can improve is the human touch when it comes to this.
Which was mentioned in the poll results. Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, for instance, if you go to the bank in a lower income estate, right? So if you go to Bukit Oswi and you try to go to the bank at the end of the month, the queue at the POSB is very, very long. While many of us are transacting it online, or, we are withdrawing from ATM machines, the older people who go and withdraw money still queue up at the teller. And CPF, for instance, right, if they want to check on something. So we need to provide access to those who do not have access right now in a smoother way. So I think the digital access will still be essential, but you need to have more humans available to help those who are left behind. That's how I see it.
Yeah, in fact, if I may add, Ranga, from this latest round of interviews with some families, some of the older folks that I've spoken to, they say that now they can't queue up at CPF. And in fact, a lot of the things have gone online onto the app, SingPass app. And even if in future, I think we are encouraged to use the app for a lot of transactions, they won't accept any more walk-ins. And that really removes the whole human touch, which is a huge struggle, I think, for especially our older folks.
Yeah. I think one of the questions that has come up is about the wireless access that Rebecca worked on with Beyond Social Services at Kebun Baru, and whether this should be made available at all the rental blocks as well. So we understood quite early even before the pandemic that wired wireless at SG is available at public spaces. It was not accessible. You have to walk to the RC, you have got to walk to the nearby library or the community center to be able to access it. And for this block in Kebun Baru, for instance, they were not very near any of those places. So providing that digital wireless access at the void deck, then we felt that we could have more activities and events to teach even the older folks there how to use WhatsApp, and things like that, partner with different agencies in that neighborhood. So that is definitely an important area to look at. How can we make Wi-Fi more prevalent?
That ties nicely to a Q&A that I'm prompted just came in, and maybe Rebecca can add to this, where we're asked to share, do you have challenges about setting that up and how to scale it up,
So some of the issues that I think some of the questions that came on board when we were actually discussing this whole project was also like whether we have how should we structure this Wi-Fi? Do we have it like a password protected kind of thing? But we discussed it, and my personal view was that we really should leave it as a really no strings attached, no holes bar kind of Wi-Fi that anybody can use, because we really don't want to create any additional challenges from people being able to log onto the Wi-Fi, not knowing how to key in a password. These are things that we really didn't want to, have people to go through. So we really wanted to make sure that this was a free-for-all thing. I think scalability, we really need support from the community to really understand the work that we are doing and how important it is for universal access, for this to be a basic need, such that it has to be something that I can access at any point of time, and I do not have to go to the nearest community center or to the nearest market to be able to log onto a Wi-Fi, and I think with that, we will be able to hopefully roll it out in more places.
I also wanted to add that many of the social service agencies, we conduct programs for children at the void decks. So if you're doing learning programs, we use the void deck spaces, we use open spaces, and having Wi-Fi where more kids can access home-based learning or get some homework support while learning in the void deck area would also be helpful. And in working with Yishun Health, there's also an initiative to get seniors online. So using simple WhatsApp to be able to communicate with each other. I think these are ways in which we can engage community where they live and allow them to interact with each other. So there's more social connections formed and they can help each other out as well. So, those concerns we have around security, around scams, this could be better addressed if they can guide each other internally without social workers having to step in to help them.
That's right. Yeah. And I think from ground research, I'm hearing that the initial efforts in programs to help elderly learn digitally, one time kind of workshop doesn't quite work, and I mean, it's just not enough because you're just not there in their lives, and you need practice and all that. Yeah. So this aspect actually links to something that is quite important to address, and I think Rebecca also alluded to that when you talk about password protection and wanting it to be free so that people can have access. The other flip concern is that when you give access so readily, what about risks that are online? Scams, bullying, right? Addictions. So what are your thoughts on this? How do we improve literacy, if another way of putting this question?
I think there'll definitely be risk, right? In every action we do, there'll be a risk, and it's important to know how to stay away from, to tackle the risk. But the thing is this, maybe bring something that's more related to people, like cooking. Let's just keep cooking as an example. When I cook, one of the basic utensils that I'll use is a knife. Can a knife pose a threat to me? Can I accidentally cut myself? I can. And should I be taught how to use a knife properly? Yes, I should. But let's think about it. Can we actually learn how to use a knife just by hearing how to use a knife? We can't. If I just watch videos on how to use a knife, I could improve. I could. But I would not actually know how to use a knife till I actually have the knife in my hand and I learn how to practice the skill that I've watched and learned. So when people talk about, oh, this is dangerous, or there's a risk, there would be risks, and we definitely need to educate people on how to be safe online. But how can you educate them without the proper resources? If they do not have the devices to practice it, they will not remember it, they will not practice it, they will not learn it. So I think it's important to, it goes hand in hand. We have to give them an access, but also educate them. If the worry is really about safety, we have to do both at the same time, because it needs to come in tandem.
Very well put. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah. Very well said, Jonathan. I agree with you. I think of course, the concern is important that, our young people and our children, do not end up being affected by the wrongful usage of the access, as well as our older people. But I think keeping them away from it is not going to stop it. So I'm reminded of this letter in the 17th century that talk about how books badly influenced young people to behave in a non-traditional way. So in any time in our course of human history, when something new has come in, whether it is books, newspapers, the telephone, the TV, people have had concerns as to the negative impact of that. And now we're talking about internet. And what also makes me, maybe it sounds a bit naughty of me to say this, why do we think that the low income will make the wrong choices? We don't worry about that for our own families and our own kids, those middle income and higher income. But why do we then doubt that the lower income or those who are disadvantaged at the moment will definitely make the wrong choice? So this is something to think about. And if we are really care about their well-being, then how can we put in place, through the various mechanisms we already have, a certain level of security and support for them so that they do not end up getting taken for a ride? So I would actually say, once again, it's not about stopping the access, it's really about how do we manage the access.
Great point too. Rebecca, you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree with what they are saying. I think, when it comes to UND, we are not really so concerned about what, how being monitored and things like that on our usage. But how come when it comes to providing something for the underprivileged, we suddenly become very concerned, about how they're using it, these things and that things. So, I mean, I think that we should be giving them, like Jonathan said, we should be giving them the access that they need, and then we'll figure it out how to mitigate any kind of risk from there.
Right. And I think some of the measures in how to help improve in the literacy while we give the devices, I think you have discussed some of that earlier, right? About having the community and being each other's teachers. Anything else to add? Any ideas on digital literacy?
I think that I still see in the Q&A that there's a concern about, giving too much and, putting families in a situation where then they'll need more and more safeguards. So I'm reminded of what China has recently done, right? So they have actually limited the amount of time that young people can spend on gaming, and and that came about, probably they saw a social issue, and probably it's possible in China to do that. I'm just wondering that we are maybe talking about safeguards too early in the discussion. So for me, it's very important for us to see what is needed, what is essential, how do we respond to it, and how do we safeguard? So that would be the process, right? So I'm still seeing in the Q&A, like, a couple of familiar names also asking, like, why do we want to impose this on families? So it is not an imposition. It's really, I think this panel here has experienced, and like many others who are listening in as well, right? As social workers, as volunteers who may have worked with these families and children and young people, you would have experienced firsthand the struggles everyone is having with regards to access and with regards to digital literacy. So this panel is really here to provide some insight along with the poll. And then it is for the 400 of us here to be able to see what more can be done towards addressing this divide.
Yeah. If I may add, and actually, like, even for China, right, it's an imposition that's to everybody. So what you and Rebecca said about the unequal, like, we have a different standard when it comes to low income and ourselves, right? So it's we talk about equal access.
Yeah, and sometimes we also think about, sometimes we worry about this a lot, but on the flip side of it, a lot of these things can become opportunities. So we worry about too much gaming, but then again, like, e-gaming is one of the biggest industries now. People actually make careers in them. And earlier on, when we were much younger, during my time, my parents would always say like, oh, don't play on the computer so much, you're wasting your time playing on the computer because you should be studying instead. So people don't realize that, these are actually those people that were playing too much on the computer now have become really successful and developed like many interesting careers and industries and products that we all now use on a day-to-day basis. So, I think, while we think of these kind of things as challenges, there are also opportunities, and we shouldn't, throw out the baby with the bathwater.
That's a great point, Rebecca. In fact, it's not just about basic needs, it's about opportunities. And when you don't have access, then you won't have those opportunities too. So especially today, we're in a knowledge economy. You just need to have the digital resources to have those opportunities, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm told that we have to wrap up. Let's go one round, just last words from each of you. Ranga, why don't we start?
Glad to be here, glad to be in this discussion. And I think it's very important that we place the people who are disadvantaged who need this access at the forefront of all our discussions and try and step away from the privileged positions that we may be at.
Thank you. Jonathan?
I think with all this, I think one of the things that popped up in the FSC towards the end is about risk. But I think sometimes it's important to take risks to move forward. That's how a lot of the great human inventions have been made. Electricity is one of it, right? Without electricity, definitely have risk, but we learn how to manage that risk and look how it's empower us. And it could be the same for digital access.
Thank you.
I think when we are thinking about all these things, how to structure the access, what we think about the programs, what we think about what is needed, we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of people who may not have the access, in order to be able to design programs, in order to be able to help out in a way that will really benefit them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. And back to you, Cindy.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Ranga. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Jonathan. That was a very exciting conversation. So much that we could take from this. But I think this is a good time to hear from participants some of your reflections. Actually, the panelists addressed some of the reflections already. But there was so much from all of you. So we're going to take some time to bring up for conversation and look through. So Ben, why don't you pick a few and then let's get us started on what did you pick up from some of the reflections from the participants?
So this is awesome. I like this. It's like a lottery moment. But I think before we do that, right, I just thought I wanted to summarize a few points that the panel has made. I think one thing that particularly struck me was when Ranga said engage community where they live. And I think for me that means a lot of things. And I think most importantly, it means also listening in to what's actually happening for them, and also listening into their stories, how they actually, basically the user experience. I think that's really, really important. Before we roll out anything nationwide, that's something that's really important. And the next thing, this is a reflection, something that I always say quite often, basically how we think about the problem shapes the solutions that we craft. And I am very reminded of the things that the panel has said. Are we jumping into risk issues too early? Are we jumping into worries too early? I mean, if we don't even have access, how can we even explore opportunities? And I think that's a really, really powerful statement for me to ponder on. Yeah, so, okay, let me pick one that I really, really like. Okay, so somebody said there's a stigma around digital living as a life of privilege instead of basic needs. We might actually need to relook into this mindset from a social service point of view and recognize it as a basic need. When we do, we may actually stop saying, if you can afford a laptop, it means you're not poor enough. Yeah, so and I got reminded of the time during circuit breaker when we were all rushing to get devices out for families. And I think even amongst social service practitioners, we were deciding on how to allocate those resources. Yeah, and now looking back, the question that I have for myself perhaps would be, why did we feel there was a need to allocate when it was super clear, crystal clear, in fact, every child is going through HPL, every child needs a learning device? Why did we tell families to share? Why did we tell them that the resources are not sufficient? What could we have done differently? Yeah.
Right. And I think this comment also is very connected with another that was shared by another participant, that, there is a stigma around digital living as a life of privilege instead of a basic need. So that, maybe this is important to relook at this mindset, so that we recognize and we start recognizing it as a basic need. We need to stop saying this, we need to relook at and reconstruct what we mean. And if this is a basic need, then what does it mean for the number of the social infrastructure that we have in place? And I think we also have comments talking about maybe we should embed access and literacy more firmly into our social infrastructure, i.e. that, it shouldn't be left to just company CSR projects or even social service agencies, but as a nation, as a society, it has to be embedded into our ecosystem, our landscape.
How can we all pitch in?
Yeah, how can we all pitch in? How can it be embedded maybe in our public school system? How can it be embedded into our job applications? How can subsidized data plans and Wi-Fi be pegged to maybe just household types? Like if you are staying in a rental flat, then maybe immediately it's free. It can be at home, it's free. So if that was made more accessible and affordable, then perhaps we would be able to bridge the divide. Yeah. So yes. What else are you picking up?
No, I was just also reminded as you spoke about the rental blocks, and when I was reading Irene and her team's research papers, I was actually very struck by the fact that some rental blocks do not have internet access points. So if you're all going to, move forward towards smart nation, and we are going to talk about things like providing devices for families, giving them, I don't know, like maybe data cards or things like that. But yet there are some rental blocks in Singapore that do not even have access points at all.
Absolutely.
What
are we saying, right?
Yeah, what are we saying? And I think perhaps a reflection for me would be just to be more thorough when we think about solutions that we could craft together. And I think the only way we could be more thorough is when we listen in to the people who actually experience the challenges and not be prescriptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And also for us to kind of tie in, I think you made a reference to the research that Irene Sansan and they published, right? And Natalie published about. Yeah, and there were many good suggestions that were made in that research paper. That they've discussed. I think it's easily available online. Also, there have been recent newspaper article. It's called Digital Poverty, right?
Yeah, on the Straits Times, and there's a very nice article over at Rise Media as well.
So a number of these things that we have talked about leading up to today's event that participants really you could get quick access to, and you could read just to get a better understanding of maybe some of the suggestions that were put forth by different people, and then you could also then consolidate and then participate in this discussion. But one of the suggestions that really sat well with me as a practitioner is to see laptops as part of the book list in school. And actually see that, one laptop per learner, have the devices actually be part of the book list instead of a separate application for those on financial assistance. Immediately that sends a different message to different people, right? So, and the kids don't have to pull out a different application form just to apply for a laptop. So one laptop, one child, one laptop per individual, and new or very good condition versus refurbished. And I think that's what I'm hearing from everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. And I think, we've heard so much and debated a lot about the why and the how. Thank you everybody for sending your reflections into the Q&A. We've learned a lot from you as well. So similar to last year's webinar, we're going to actually jump into a participatory segment. We like to call this the call to action. But yeah, so really we are going to explore the collective how, and what better way to do that than to actually share with you some of the stories that our beneficiaries have shared with us as well. But I think what I would really want to remind all of us again, and even myself, is that it's really important to enhance the insights that we have, by really listening into the voices and the experiences of the families and also the professionals who work with them, so that we know and we understand better what the pain points are, their lived realities, what are perhaps some consequences and implications of the solutions that we freely put out, the suggestions that we freely put out, or perhaps even the ways or perceptions that we think of families who are going through difficulties. So yeah, as a thought starter on what's to come next, we would like to show you 3 videos from beneficiaries, and do continue to keep your thoughts and reflections coming into the Q&A as well. So let's watch the video first.
所说的我的程度不是很高。
Yeah, for me it's a bit difficult because I need to learn a lot of things from it.
希望教的人会有耐心啊，要教老人要教一样而已，慢慢来，慢慢来，学的真的恐怕会了 ，OK 哦，然后可以再学第2样吧。
对，要有耐心，要时常你听慢慢的教啊，他们会比较明白，是要用一个图片，要被写个按这个，我就明白按这个，我就会按这个，然后就看下一个结果是什么，就比较明白。
如果公共的地方有 WiFi 也是帮助不了啊，因为我都很少出去。如果家里有的话，最好的啦，比较好安全啦。我们一个乐龄人家啦，一老人家啦，对出去食堂是很少出去的，对我是也是一种压力，也是一种困难啦。
I hope that even the Singaporeans and people who's homeless, I hope that they are provided with a device and to actually put networks around Singapore so that it's easy for them to communicate.
Every student will have the accessibility to technology to devices for studying. But not only that, but also for them to be equipped with the appropriate technology knowledge.
So right now, we want to hear from all of you. So again, similar to last year, we would like you to log on to menti.com. So if you have either another device or, you could have another browser, turn it on, log on to menti.com and enter the code that is featured right now on your screen, 83149295. And I will be asking you some questions to consolidate just some of our key experience from today's webinar, and also asking you to consider thinking through what is it that maybe is one thing that you can do. So I would give you some time to log on. There's 30 of you, 40 now. So please log on. We have at any point, 300 to 400 people on this webinar. So we would love to see everyone's contribution. So we're going to give you some time to log on, and then we will start constructing together what is our experience from today, and also maybe some of the things that we would do together. It is really more important, I think, for us to collaborate and to find solutions together so that it becomes embedded very sufficiently into our ecosystem without it being just a band-aid of some sort to just get by, because COVID may not stay forever, but the digital transformation needs to be very clear and it needs to be embedded. So this is the part that is very important for us. So we may not have solutions to everything at this point, but we do need to take time to understand the issue and to collaborate on thinking about the solutions. So, okay. Well, let's move to the questions. I'm going to get you all to take some time and think and reflect. And share with us, how do you feel at this point? How do you feel at this point, when after 1 hour and 40, almost 1.5 hours? Privilege, hopeful.
Oh, wow, thanks.
That must be from your fan, Brenda. Right. Can you see that?
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, there is a general sense of a desire for things to get better. There's a general sense of hope. There's a general sense of us acknowledging that if we didn't feel that it's such a big problem, we are probably privileged.
Yeah, and Cindy, as you say this, right, I got reminded of Santosh's presentation earlier on how we are actually a lot more similar than we are divided. And that, a lot of people say that, oh, Singaporeans are not ready for this, they don't care enough and things like that. That's not true. I mean, all 700 of you have cared so much to share your thoughts and to participate in something that you feel could make a difference to somebody else. Yep. And I think that's really powerful.
Yep, absolutely. So we're more aligned. We're more aligned than we think, right? So you can see that the major reflection at this point is that people feel privileged, hopeful, and reflective. And this is important because I think that's the purpose of IDEP. The purpose of IDEP is not always because the problem of poverty is not easily solved, but it is important for us to leave IDEP every day, every year, being more aware of what's going on. And this is the purpose of today's event. Let's move to the next. Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. I was just about to say, and sometimes solutions are not tangible in nature.
Yeah.
It may not come in the form of a product or a service, but it may come from us telling somebody else that, hey, how about looking at the issue from another perspective?
Yeah.
Can we talk a lot more about it? And I think that's powerful enough.
Right. And to actually engage in conversations, it always begins there. Yeah. Let's look at the next question. What is one thing you can do? So one thing that we can do and one thing that you can do. One thing that you can do.
Yeah, thanks for that. Be patient in imparting. I got reminded again of what Pat and Santosh mentioned earlier, linking their mums up to share information. And I think it's really powerful when, that there's kind of like a informal mentoring going on in the community. People help each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah. I see a lot of people alluding to contributing. That's good, either in skills or in items in kind. I see people talking about having more conversations, important, and more advocacy. Talking about starting from home, creating awareness. That's so important. Actually, now come to think of it, a lot of actions are predisposed by this content. Right. So while people remain hopeful in the previous question, I'm also guessing that there must be this content to push us to do something. So it is important for us to recognize what is the discontent with the current situation. It doesn't mean that people are not doing enough. It means that it can be better. And
it can be different.
Yeah, it can be different. And because things change, right? Society evolves. So then solutions needs to be also evolving. And we're not saying who's doing it right or who's doing it wrong, but that we should really evolve in our solutioning together. So this is really exciting to look at.
Yeah,
this keeps going.
Yeah, it keeps going.
Going.
And Cindy, earlier on, we also mentioned that a lot of things come second nature to us, like how to log on into Zoom, right? How to log on into Zoom. Just a few clicks, you kind of get the hang of it. It's very second nature, but to somebody who has not felt the need perhaps, or has not learned the need, to be able to utilize such platforms, it is not second nature. And I also got reminded of I think it's probably in the Rise Media article, whereby the author was also talking about how basic need in itself, something that's basic to you and me, like speaking over Zoom, checking out emails, it's basic. but to people who don't need to use emails, it is not. But does this mean that they should be excluded from the whole, Smart Nation journey, for example? I don't think so.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. So on this note, I want to thank all participants for contributing to the word cloud. It's really fascinating to watch. Brenda, I think that we wanted to encourage more commitment to action. Yeah, I'll pass time to you.
Yes, please. So I think remember the animation video that we shared earlier on in the webinar. I mean, every one of us has a different way of helping, of supporting, or of spreading the word. But perhaps one way that we could suggest for all of us, all 400 of us, perhaps you could share the video. And the tech team has kindly put up a QR code here. Spread the word around, share it with your family, your friends. If there's something that you have learned on this video, something that you have reflected on, or something that you would like to expand your conversation on, the video could be a good anchor for you to share the message as well. And it is at this time where I would invite all the other participants of today to be on screen.
Our other panelists.
Yeah, the panelists. And perhaps I would start. Cindy, I'm going to issue you a challenge. Who would you share the video with?
Okay. I thought it would be nice to share them actually with, first of all, my own parents, right? The most unlikely people that I might talk to about digital access, because they struggle so much with it. And I'm thinking that this would resonate with them, and this would maybe enable them to feel that they could spread that, it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to get access, and it is their right, and this is their need, and therefore their community can then have advocate for access to digitalization. So yeah, so just thinking about maybe just sharing with my own parents.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Ranga to share next. Ranga is based in Berlin right now, and she's joining us through this webinar. So thank you so much, Ranga. Who would you share the video with?
I'll share it with my German students here. At the same time, I think I'll also share it with my networks. I belong to different networks. And most importantly, I feel I want to share it with my local community members in the various neighborhoods that we live in, because this is very real for them. And, for them to know that they have been heard, they are being seen, is important. So I'd like to share with them as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. How about Rebecca?
I will share it on my social media platforms so that, as we look at it, we can be reminded that not everyone has the same level of access, and not everyone is as privileged as others may be.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's definitely a good idea. Jonathan?
Yeah, I'll share with my friends and also my family also. So I think this is something that not everyone might come across or think about. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And last but not least, Irene, who would you share it with? You have an extensive network as well.
Yeah, but actually some of the most interesting conversations I've had when I shared the OP poll and the previous posters has been with my family and my childhood friends, my 12-year-old niece, So I think I would definitely share with my family and friends, because they are people who don't usually think about this. They are more like the kinds that Brenda, you mentioned, you just take it for granted, right? Because we're just so used to it.
Yeah, it's so second nature.
That's right.
But thanks for that. So I think it's 4:15. At this point, I think we would want to move towards wrap up of this webinar. So if in closing, before we say goodbye, perhaps I'll invite Cindy to maybe share perhaps one or two closing reflections or insights.
Right. So I think this journey has been very interesting even for me after being in the sector for so many years. I learned so much from just hearing the beneficiaries and also reading what different people think about digital access and how to make it universal. I am reminded actually during the lead up to today's event that the progress of a society is actually not measured by how much wealth we have achieved as a country. It is not measured by the amount of good stuff that we have, but it's really measured by how we facilitate social inclusion, social participation, and social integration for all members of our society, regardless of we are, what socioeconomic status we are at, or what's our nationality, our age or race. But so today's webinar really brings home a few points for me. Number one, that everyone needs the same access. Yeah. And number two, everyone needs the same literacy and connectivity. And number three, formal agencies can play a part in creating a sustainable ecosystem and structure to support the digital transformation. So everybody can do something. So these are the three important points for me. And I also have been thinking about, just quick summaries of what I take back from this whole lead up, right? So I have this thing that I keep thinking about, like 1 for 1. This was from Irene's research. One person, one device. Right, so 1 to 1. New, not refurbished.
And not to forget adult learners as well.
Yes, not to forget that. So 1 to 1, everybody should have their own device, right? One laptop to one person, one very good mobile phone to one person. New, not refurbished. At least must be in good quality condition, So new, very good condition, not refurbished. And lastly, owned, not loaned. So everybody needs to own one, we shouldn't have to give back our device, because that it will help us to have more social participation. So that's my take back from this whole lead up to today's event. What about you, Brenda?
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Before I go on, I've got an announcement for everybody. So the QR code is broken. So I think so
that's our digital device.
Yes. So we've put the correct code into the chat. So we apologize for the broken code earlier on. So please share the video using the link in the chat. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So yeah, I think for me, I really like the quote, online inequalities have offline consequences. And I think this is a quote that came through from the research, the news articles as well. But it's not that we cannot do anything about it. We can really help others participate more meaningfully, perhaps through conversations, or, through more user experience focused understanding of the challenges, the real challenges faced by people who struggle with digital access. And for us to move to a smart nation, for a nationwide digital transformation to take place, these are great ambitions, and I don't think we should give up on these ambitions, but the ambitions and aspirations must really be matched by equitable efforts to help people, such that there wouldn't be that 10% that gets left behind anymore. Because 10% may sound like a small percentage, but 10% of Singapore population, I think it's a huge cost to still bear. Yeah, so that's for me.
Right. So on this note, I think we really want to thank everyone for being here. And we also have a number of partners and collaborators to thank, right?
Yeah. So if we could have the last slide, please. Okay, so this year's webinar is really, really special, because I think for me, other than having a new hosting partner, thanks Cindy, I think it's really special as well, because a lot of concerned citizens, social service agencies, organizations, charities, schools, residents have come together, to put all the thoughts as well as all their experiences together for this webinar. So we have these partners to thank, but most importantly, I think in closing, we really want to thank the beneficiaries and the families who have so generously shared their stories with us. It is through their stories that we learn, and it is through their stories that we can craft better solutions together, not for them, but with them. Yeah, so with this, thank you for joining us this lovely Saturday afternoon for IDEP. We hope to see you again next year, and enjoy your weekend. See ya.